I've watched the ATF screw with gun owners my whole life, but this time the hammer's coming down on them instead. With budget cuts this deep, and the DOJ floating a merger into the DEA, the agency that's been the Fed's attack dog on the Second Amendment might not survive the next round. What's up, everyone? This is Sully from Line 45, and today I'm talking about how the ATF went from puffing its chest over missing signatures to straight up begging for survival, and why this merger with the DEA might be the knockout punch that finally puts that agency in the dirt. Before we dive in, do me a solid. Smash that subscribe, tap the bell, hit all the dang buttons down there. You don't gotta, but it keeps this train rolling and lets me crank out more of this wild gun talk for y'all. All right, enough of that. Let's get back to it. From paperwork police to under the knife, it's not a secret that the ATF has swung hard at the gun community for decades, especially on technical slip-ups, and that reputation didn't grow out of thin air. A U.S. Senate subcommittee in the early 82nd blasted the agency's focus on collectors and minor violations, a wave of criticism that helped fuel the Firearm Owners Protection Act years later. Fast forward to right now. The ground under ATF is shaking. The White House's FY 2026 plan would drop ATF's budget to about $1.2 billion from roughly $1.625 billion, the leanest since at least 2016, according to Reuters reporting on an internal preview. The DOJ is also studying a DEA-ATF merger as part of a wider restructuring push. That combo, deep cuts plus consolidation, puts the agency's future squarely on the chopping block. Why does that matter beyond headlines? ATF's day job includes violent crime gun work, arson and bombing investigations, and ballistic tracing, niche skills most locals don't have on tap. AP's breakdown of the DOJ memo spells that out clearly, while confirming the merger idea is on the table. Inside the building, the numbers aren't pretty either. ATF has roughly 5,300 employees, about half sworn agents, and the belt tightening has already stalled hiring. Reuters notes unfilled agent slots and canceled incoming classes even before the new cuts fully hit. When you choke staffing like that, inspections, lab work, and complex gun crime cases slow down. So here's where we're headed in this breakdown. I'm going to show you how the budget axe lands, who loses seats, and why talk of a DEA marriage has veteran agents whispering about the end of ATF as a standalone badge. The budget axe that cuts deep. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Trump's 2026 budget proposal didn't just nick ATF's funding. It hacked nearly a third of it clean off. Reuters laid it out plain. ATF drops from about $1.625 billion down to $1.2 billion, which is a 29% cut, and the lowest budget the agency has seen since 2016. That kind of hit doesn't get smoothed over with a few hiring freezes. It guts whole sections of what ATF does day to day. The biggest casualty? Inspectors. The Washington Post reported that out of 800 inspectors, more than 500 positions are on the chopping block. Those are the people who walk into FFL shops, paw through bound books, and write up violations over a missing initial on a Form 4473. With that inspector corps basically halved, ATF loses its main pressure valve on gun stores. Agents aren't safe either. The workforce is headed toward 3,600 sworn agents, way below the agency's long-standing push to grow toward 9,000 to 12,000. That means fewer undercover stings, fewer industry raids, and less ability to keep up the regulatory squeeze. Cuts like this ripple in every direction. Training classes for new agents are canceled, investigations pile up, and the folks who do stay in are stretched thin. DOJ memos even floated the possibility of shifting major casework to DEA if the merger goes through. Bottom line, this wasn't a trim, it was a body blow. And to really understand why it landed so hard, you've got to look at the scandals that made ATF such an easy target. The scandals that left the ATF exposed. You don't slash an agency by almost a third unless the ground's already soft under them. ATF's track record over the last few decades has been one embarrassing headline after another, And every one of those cracks made it easier for Congress and the White House to swing the axe. Take Operation Fast and Furious. Between 2009 and 2011, ATF let more than 2,000 firearms walk straight into cartel hands under a gun-walking scheme. They didn't track most of them, and one of those rifles turned up at the murder scene of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. That scandal still hangs over the agency. Then there was Operation Fearless in Milwaukee in 2013. ATF set up a fake storefront to catch criminals, but the plan collapsed. They lost firearms, including a fully automatic M4, had gear stolen, and even recruited a man with an intellectual disability to drum up business, paying him in cigarettes. Whistleblowers later revealed ATF desk employees were fraudulently overpaid, at least $5 million in improper overtime, and watchdogs warned the number might be much higher. Add in reports of firearms stolen from ATF warehouses, and you've got an agency that couldn't even keep its own house in order. Every one of those failures chipped away at credibility. So when lawmakers went hunting for budget fat, ATF wasn't just low-hanging fruit, it was rotten fruit. And now DOJ's talking merger, you can see why they're the first name on the chopping block. Next, let's talk about why the DEA is the one waiting to swallow them whole. Why does the DOJ eyeing the DA merger? All right, let's call this what it is. The feds are circling wagons, and ATF's the runt they're about to throw to the wolves. The DOJ's looking at the DEA because in the books, the two already trip over each other. Guns and dope run hand in hand. Cartels, gangs, traffickers, it's all one pipeline. DEA's got the manpower and the budget, ATF's got the baggage. From a bean counter's perspective, you fold the smaller outfit into the bigger one and call it efficiency. Here's the kicker. D's got an actual national footprint, thousands of agents, a way deeper infrastructure, and a culture built around narcotics enforcement. ATF? They've always been the sidecar, punching above their weight with raids and paperwork sweeps, but never big enough to carry their own weight clean. You slam those missions together and suddenly the DOJ says they've cut redundancy. In plain English, that's DC speak for, we're tired of funding two agencies when one'll do. And don't think ATF's dirty laundry isn't part of this. Fast and Furious still haunts them. Operation Fearless made them look like amateurs. Millions lost in overtime scams. Guns stolen from their own lockers. It's a rap sheet that makes it way too easy for politicians to say, why are we still paying for this circus? If the DOJ makes the move, ATF's nameplate comes off the door. No more separate budget line. No independent chain of command. For gun owners, that means the attack dog that's been biting at your heels for decades might be getting put down by its own handler, and that opens the door to a whole new fight over what happens to their rules. What happens to gun regulations if ATF folds? You and I know that ATF has been the muscle behind federal gun rules, pistol brace bans, forced reset trigger crackdowns, the infamous "don't buy for the other guy" campaigns. Even that bloated 7-page Form 4473 they made every FFL babysit. With a third of their budget gone and a merger on the table, the question isn't if those pushes slow down, it's how many get dropped cold. The Washington Post already confirmed over 500 inspectors are being cut loose, and those are the folks who used to hammer gun shops over clerical errors. That means far fewer compliance visits, fewer bound books being combed through, and less leverage to bully small FFLs into surrendering licenses. On top of that, the DOJ's restructuring plan under Musk-backed Doge has already started killing off ATF red tape. Form 4473, chopped from 7 pages down to 3, is a prime example. When you gut the people writing and enforcing the paperwork, whole categories of regulatory harassment evaporate overnight. If the merger with the DEA goes through, ATF's rulemaking power gets scattered. DEA doesn't have a history of drafting firearms regs. They chase dope, not paperwork. That could leave future gun rule changes entirely in the hands of Congress and the courts, not faceless bureaucrats. What I am trying to point out here is that the agency that's been the spearhead for federal gun regulation might not have the bandwidth or even the authority to keep pushing, and that swings the spotlight straight onto local cops who'll be carrying the weight instead. Local cops versus feds. Here's where the story takes a sharp turn, boys. You gut ATF by a third and toss their leftovers into DEA. The fallout doesn't vanish. It just slides downhill. Local cops and sheriffs are the ones stuck carrying the load. And let me tell you, they don't play the same game ATF's been playing. ATF made a career out of busting FFLs for typos, stacking binders of 4,473 second, and running sting ops that look more like Saturday Night Live skits than law enforcement. That's what 500 inspectors used to do before those jobs got axed. Now, that paper-chasing army is gone. ATF's down to about 3,600 agents, and that's across the whole damn country. They don't have the manpower anymore to camp out at gun shows, spy on shops, or shake down dealers for missing initials. When the feds step back, local law picks up, and your county sheriff ain't wasting time auditing paperwork. He's knocking doors on gang shooters and carjack crews because that's what keeps him in office. Local cops answer to voters and city councils, not unelected bureaucrats hiding in D.C. That means more focus on crime that hits home and less nonsense about whether you stapled a form on the right side. So the balance shifts. Instead of ATF babysitting every transaction, locals are back in the driver's seat, chasing bad guys that actually wreck neighborhoods. And that leads right into the million-dollar question. What if ATF doesn't just shrink, but straight up gets wiped off the map? Could this be the end of ATF as we know it? Look, we've seen cuts before. Every agency takes its lumps when budgets tighten. But this one feels different. ATF didn't just get trimmed, it got kneecapped. A 29% budget slash, half its inspectors gone, agent numbers falling through the floor, and DOJ floating a DEA merger? That's not a bad year. That's a death sentence in slow motion. If the merger happens, the ATF as a standalone badge disappears. No more dedicated gun police breathing down FFL's necks. No more endless rulemaking rolling out of an office building in D.C. DEA isn't built to chase clerical errors on 4,473 second. They're built to hammer drug cartels. That means all those little enforcement schemes ATF lived on, pistol brace bans, FRT witch hunts, undercover storefront scams, don't have a home anymore. For the 2-ampere crowd, that's a win decades in the making. But let's not miss the bigger point. This is a cultural reset. For years, ATF operated like an untouchable fiefdom, answering to no voters, backed only by bureaucrats. Now, their leash is short, their money's cut, and their future is up in the air. Whether they're folded into the DEA or left limping on scraps, the message is clear. The era of ATF running unchecked is over, and that's the ending gun owners have been waiting for. Not just fewer raids, not just less red tape, but the possible end of the agency that's been the Fed's attack dog on the Second Amendment for 50 years. That's a page-turner you don't see often in Washington.